Bookworms, welcome to the Weekend Readers Book Club. Thank you for joining us. In this episode, we are discussing the 2024 Goodreads award-winning book. Yes, it is the book for Best Debut Novel. It also got nominated for Best Romance Novel as well, but it didn't win, but it won Best Debut Novel. We're discussing How to End a Love Story by Yulin Kuang. So, as I mentioned, this book is a romance novel to a degree, I guess. The story itself is quite unique. Like, the plot behind the main plot is quite unique. Basically, we have our main character, Helen, and we have our main character, Grant. Helen and Grant went to school back in the day. 13 years ago, Helen had a sister. Helen's sister died, and Grant was the last person to basically see Helen's sister alive. So there is some animosity there. Now, we skip forward 13 years where the main story takes place. Helen is an author getting a TV series made out of her book. Grant, well, he's the TV writer. They meet, they realize who each other are, and what entails is a story where we go all over the show. But it's a romance book, remember? Helen and Grant have to work together, try and cohabitate, and through cohabitating and seeing where each other's lives are at the present day, the animosity that they had towards each other 13 years ago slowly disappears, and then we get the, ooh, how you doing? Peer, and well, yeah, the love story involves, well, Helen and Grant. So, I've read How to End a Love Story by Yulin Kuang. These are my thoughts about the book. Okay, first off the bat, while I haven't read the other debut novel finalists, I get why this book may have won an award. The subject matter in relation to Helen's sister's death and Helen and Grant's dynamic, we basically go through the grief process all over again, removed 13 years after the fact. That's sort of what I got in the story. And the author, Yulin Kuang, sort of tippy-toed through that whole process very well, I found, in my opinion, throughout the book. So I came away going, okay, I get why it was popular. I get the emotional roller coaster you go on, especially with Helen and Grant, and especially Helen's family as well, who shows up in this book, which is her mum and her dad. I get the emotional roller coaster portion of it, so I get it. The first chapter sets the scene in relation to what you need to know. Then we get little snippets of what happened 13 years ago as the story goes along. There is a chapter, well, there's actually a few chapters, but mainly there's one chapter where Grant tells what happened from his side of the story, and wow, it's like something to go through. And the trauma and the mental conflict that each character has, that you could foresee yourself having if this was to happen in real life, i.e. a family member dying, you get that and their struggle very well. Like, it's written really well where you're in touch with the characters, and in my opinion, I was like, wow, I really understand it. I'm more Team Grant than Team Helen, but that's just my opinion. But that's me. I'm gonna say it here. The love aspect of it, I get it, right? However, in my opinion, the characters just ended up as two horny teenagers that just wanted to, be sexually intimate, all the time they can. Workplace, home, other person's home, workplace, party. It was something, right? And in my opinion, they came across just as horny teenagers looking for that 20 minutes or half an hour or an hour where they can just be intimate to one another and then carry on their lives. I found myself throughout this book wanting more of the mental anguish, and I think that's why I really enjoyed the chapter where Grant explains what happened to Helen's sister from his point of view, 13 years ago, and then also what has happened since and how it's impacted his life. I found myself after finishing the book, well, actually, probably about halfway through to the very end, as we started approaching these subjects, I wanted less of the mushy stuff and more of the mental anguish and just the aspects of somebody going through that process where you're face to face now with somebody that you potentially thought you would never see again because this happened when they were at school 13 years ago. And while it's traumatic at the time, your school kids, you're like, oh, I'm not going to see that person ever again because everybody goes their separate ways. But then, bam, you actually see them. I get Yulin Kuang captured some of the emotion, but I just wanted more. I wanted the mental anguish, the real guts and grit of what they're going through. We got a lot of it from Grant's perspective, not a lot from Helen's perspective. But again, Helen's perspective sort of came off, well, we're just going to go with the flow. And even her dynamic with her parents about the situation came off very flaky in my opinion, but that's just me. And I think that, again, was why I resonated more with the Grant character than the Helen character. I will say that this book itself, both characters are the main focal point of the story. You do have some supporting characters which are other fellow writers and Helen's parents, but the majority of it is taken from Grant's perspective and also Helen's. So the question will be, will How to End a Love Story by Yulin Kuang be going onto my bookshelf? Now, this was a library book I picked up, so am I going to go out, buy it, put it on my bookshelf? The answer is no, solely because great story. If you haven't read this book, I would say go out, give it a whirl if you like romance novels and potentially a little bit of mental anguish in relation to grief and people from past turning up and being completely shocked and having to work through that process. If it had less mushy and more mental anguish, yes. But in my opinion, there was too much mushy for me, so unfortunately, How to End a Love Story by Yulin Kuang, you have not made my bookshelf. As it customs at the Weekend Readers, as one book closes, another book has to open, and it is now time to find out what the next read for the Weekend Readers Book Club is. And Bookworms, we can confirm we are doing a book that I'm extremely excited for. I've got this book. I believe I got it for Father's Day last year, and I'm super duper excited to read this. We are reading Growing Wings, the inside story of Red Bull Racing by Ben Hunt. If you're an F1 fan, this is about the Red Bull Racing F1 team. Not Team RB. I follow Team RB, Yuki Tsunoda #1, but this is about the main team, I believe, Red Bull Racing. It covers, I believe, from 2014 when they took over from Jaguar, and a yearly account throughout their span up until the end of 2023 season. So this book I'm excited for. My kids got this for me. I'm looking forward to reading Growing Wings, the inside story of Red Bull Racing. You are the next read for the Weekend Readers Book Club. So Bookworms, that was my review and discussion of How to End a Love Story by Yulin Kuang, a book I enjoyed reading, don't get me wrong. I, to a degree, understand why I got Best Debut Novel, because the subject, like in my opinion, the subject matter was unique, and the love story, was okay. A lot of mushy stuff, but overall, a decent read. I did find myself like powering through the pages and wanting to read more, especially, as I said, from Grant's perspective. Not so much Helen's, but more Grant. And I mean, if you're picking up the book more and more and more, it must make for an interesting read. So yeah, it was enjoyable overall. So Bookworms, until next time, thank you again for joining us, and happy reading.